I'd say it's time to shift the spotlight back on our junior hockey team, and the WHL released a whole schedule, so we know when to expect episodes for the rest of the season. Anyway, it's time for another episode of Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome back to another episode of my Calgary Hitmen in 6, Season 3, Episode 3, as we'll look back on how games 7 to 12 went in the 2020-21 WHL season, special All Alberta COVID edition, as the schedule has had every team playing in their divisions only, just similar to in the National Hockey League. But we actually now have games all scheduled for the rest of the season. Because if you go back to the last episode, we all knew how many games up to game 11 for the Calgary Hitmen. So I guess you'll find out what that 12th game is in this episode. But the rest of the schedule has been released. And also to note, as I'm recording this on Easter weekend, so there's going to be a delay from when I recorded this to when it will actually get rendered and uploaded, because I do have other plans today and dinner. So this video will be posted a little later, so it's just some introduction, rambling, and some housekeeping items to get out of the way first. So now that we know the schedule for the rest of the season, might as well tell you when I plan to upload the next episodes to give you an idea when to expect it. Well, I got this episode right now over Easter weekend. Episode 4, when we're going to recap games 13 to 18, that episode will come around April 17th. Then I guess the final episode, because I don't think there's actually going to be playoffs. I think this season's just all a matter of just getting games in for our prospects, and have some games in for players that could potentially be drafted in the 2021 NHL draft. The last episode, episode 5, I think this would wrap up season 3 when I recap games 19 to 24. That will come on May the 6th. So that's when to expect, if everything goes as planned, for the next batch of episodes for my Calgary Hitmen in 6. And I think after episode 5, probably going to be recapping the season and how it went, and look forward ahead to the off season and next season. So now let's get into the actual game recaps at hand. So game 7, we go back to Saturday, March the 20th, as the Calgary Hitmen were also continuing on with their weekend set with the Lethbridge Hurricanes, and this game was at the 7T Sportsplex in Tsuut'ina Nation. That's the Calgary Hitmen's home away from home for this season. It was a 7 p.m. puck drop. So the first period, the Calgary Hitmen strike first, as it was Josh Prokop who scores his third of just past the 3.5 minute marker to make a 1-0 game for Calgary early. Then just about a minute later in the first period, let's highlight a fight. So early in this game, we had a goal and a fight. It was Cale Zimmerman for Calgary and Dino Kembitz for Lethbridge. And I'm going to say this game definitely had some fisticuffs and some extra action for this one. So after the goal and the fight, so then just past the 9.5 minute mark in the first period, Lethbridge actually ties up the game at 1-1 as Liam Kindry scores his second, and that's how things stood after the first period. So we had a couple goals for each side and a fight to highlight the first period. Second period, the game stays 1-1 for the first half of the period, and then things definitely got chippy, as I touched upon that there was definitely a lot more fisticuffs. And the Calgary Hitmen found themselves in penalty trouble, and definitely, I'm going to say the penalty kill, I would say at this point, has been a sore spot for the Hitmen. 5 penalties were dished out in a 3.5 minute span at the 10 minute mark, with 3 going to the Calgary Hitmen. So at about the 10 minute mark, there were 5 penalties dished out, 3 of them going to the Calgary Hitmen. Lethbridge took advantage of our shaky power play at this point, as the Calgary Hitmen had struggled on the penalty kill so far this season. Lethbridge scores 2 power play goals to take a 3-1 lead. First was Logan Barlick, who scores the second just at the 13-minute mark. And then Justin Hall for Lethbridge, his 6 just before the 14.5 minute mark. So Lethbridge on 2 power play goals now have a 3-1 lead at this point. And that's how things stood after the second period. Now Lethbridge leading with 3-1. Late in the second period, there was actually more fighting to note. It was Jackson Vandaley for the Calgary Hitmen, and it was Dina Kembitz who definitely took his second fight of the game and took a misconduct for Lethbridge. And this happened at the 18.5 minute mark. So I'm going to say this game definitely had a lot of physicality and some chippiness. There is some potential for that, especially if you have weekend sets with the same opponent. Third period, the Calgary Hitmen pressed back, looking to get back in this one, and eventually they were able to do so later in the third period. First, Lethbridge took 3 straight penalties in the period, but they were able to kill it off. So Calgary had some power play opportunity, but did not capitalize. But it was a factor in the game opening up more for the Calgary Hitmen, so the game still stayed 3-1 at that point. Calgary did not get within 1 until the 14.5 minute mark, so it wasn't until the 14.5 minute mark in the third period that we got within 1, as it was Tyson Galloway who scores a second to make it a 3-2 game for the Lethbridge Hurricanes at that point. Then the Calgary Hitmen ties it up at 3, as Riley Fitter-Schultz scored his third at exactly 17:42, so in the final 2.5 minutes of the third period, the Calgary Hitmen ties it up at 3. So after that, there was no more scoring to report. As I like to say, this one needs overtime. In overtime, it was Tyson Galloway again who scores the second of the game, so he scored the second goal for the Calgary Hitmen, scores the game winner at exactly 38 seconds in overtime. So Calgary ultimately won this one 4-3 after getting behind in the second period. Calgary also outshot the Lethbridge 40-33 or 32 overall, including just that 1-0 in overtime. That was just the only shot that counted that was taken in overtime. Calgary was obviously led by Tyson Galloway, who had 2 goals and assists, scored the second goal and the game winner. Josh Prokop got a goal and assist, and then on the Lethbridge side of the puck, Jack Stringer and Alex Cotton each chipped in with 2 assists. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, it was Jack Van Otten who made 29 saves for Calgary, while it was Carl Tediak who made 36 saves for the Lethbridge Hurricanes. So that was Game 7. So Game 8, this happened the next night on Sunday, March the 24th, or 21st as I meant to say, as the scene shifts to Lethbridge at the MX Centre for a 7 p.m. puck drop to wrap up this weekend set. And it was definitely, let's say this one was a wild one. There was a lot of scoring to report in this game. First goal of the game goes to Calgary, as it was Adam Kidd who scores his first of the season just before the 6-minute marker to make it 1-0 for Calgary. However, at the 9-minute mark, the Calgary Hitmen got into some penalty trouble, which actually led Lethbridge to having a 5-on-3 advantage. And then at the 10-minute mark, so just a minute after when Calgary got down 2 men, it was on the power play as Largan Barlick for the Lethbridge Hurricanes scores his third to tie it up at 1-1 at the 10.5 minute mark of the first period. And that's how things stood after the first period. And then there was still some other physical play to note that coincidental rough and penalties occurred at the 39 seconds of the first period. So we had a 1-1 game going into the second period. Second period, the Calgary Hitmen opened up a lead as in the 3-minute span to score 3 goals. So the Calgary Hitmen blew this game open first in the second period. The first goal came just before the 9-minute mark, so we had to go all the way to the 9-minute mark of the second period before Calgary scored their 3 goals in 3 minutes. First, it was Zach Funk who got his second of the season to make it a 2-1 game for the Calgary Hitmen at that point. Then it was Cale Zimmerman who scores a second just past the 11.5 minute mark to make it 3-1 for Calgary. And then just 25 seconds later, at the 12-minute mark, it was Adam Kidd who got his second of the game. So now Calgary had a 4-1 lead at that point in the second period. And that's how things stood after the second period. Calgary looking good, leading 4-1. And the first Calgary adds to their total as going into the third period as the Wild offense continues, as I can say. First Calgary actually adds to their lead is Connor Gabbard. He scores his first of the season just before the 3.5 minute mark of the third period to make it 5-1. So going in the third period, 3.5 minute mark, it was Connor Gabbard. He scores his first. However, Lethbridge didn't actually make a game out of this. As I mentioned, it was a wild one for offense, and Lethbridge definitely closed the gap going into the third period. First, it was Jet Jones. He scores his third at the 6.5 minute mark to make it a 5-2 game for Calgary at that point. Then exactly at 11:48, it was Zach Stringer for Lethbridge who scores his second, and then now we have a 5-3 game. So suddenly, Lethbridge seems to be getting some life. Then on the power play, as Calgary took a boarding penalty past the 14.5 minute mark, it was Zach Stringer who strikes again for Lethbridge. Got his second of the game at the 15-16 minute mark of the third period. So now it's suddenly a 5-4 game for Calgary. So Lethbridge now has scored 3 straight games. And then with Lethbridge having momentum and pulling the goalie for the extra attacker, actually the Calgary Hitmen was able to put a couple away in the empty net. First is Riley Stott, who scores his first at the 18-minute mark, and then Josh Prokop at 19-16 put this on the way. So ultimately, the Calgary Hitmen wins this one 7-4. So definitely there was a wild weekend. There was a little chippy game the night before, and then a lot of offense to wrap up this weekend set. So Calgary sweeps the weekend set with Lethbridge with a 7-4 to win. Calgary also outshot the Lethbridge Hurricanes 40-36 overall, but Lethbridge had a 17-12 edge shots in the third period when they were looking to come back in this one. Calgary was led by Adam Kidd, who had 2 goals, and then Tristan Zandy actually chipped in with 3 assists for the Calgary Hitmen. Lethbridge was led by Zach Stringer, who got 2 goals for that rally for Lethbridge Hurricanes, and then Dino Kembitz and Adam Cotton each chipped in with 2 assists. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, it was Braden Peters who was in net. Made 32 saves for Calgary, well, it's Brian Thompson who made 33 saves for Lethbridge. So that was game number 8. So now game number 9 is happened on Friday, March 26th. Is now the Calgary Hitmen were taking on the Edmonton Oil Kings, and this is definitely a test of the game because the Edmonton Oil Kings definitely have been a stronger team the last couple seasons. So this first game was at the Downtown Community Arena up in Edmonton at 7 p.m. puck drop. First of 3 on this weekend set, and as I meant to say, this is a good test to see where the Calgary Hitmen are at this point in the season. Given this was the Battle of Alberta WHL style, there actually wasn't much rough stuff to report by Edmonton, but Edmonton did flex their offensive muscles. In this game, the first goal was by Carson Latimer for Edmonton, who scored his second at the 8.5 minute mark to make it 1-0 for Edmonton at that point. Then Edmonton makes it 2-0 as Jalen Lupin scores his 5th at the 11.5 minute mark. So Edmonton now had a 2-0 lead 11.5 minutes into the first period. Then it was Calgary was able to get within 1 as Connor Gabbard scores his second just past the 6.5 minute mark to make it 2-1 game. However, just after when Calgary scored that goal, literally 15 seconds later, it was Jalen Lupin who scores the second of the game. So now Edmonton regains a 2-goal lead by taking a 3-1 lead. And that's how things stood after the first period with the Edmonton Oil Kings leading 3-1. Second period, there was only 1 penalty as the Calgary Hitmen was shorthanded just past the 9.5 minute mark. However, that was all Edmonton needed for their power play as they actually took advantage of it. As Edmonton scored on the power play as Josh Williams scores at his 6th of the season at 9:42. And now Edmonton takes a 4-1 lead roughly around the midway point of the second period in the game. Calgary, however, did get this one back later in the second period. First is Orca Weisbach, who scores his first of the season at 12:48 to make it a 4-2 game for Edmonton. And then Calgary gets within 1. So Calgary started to make a game out of this and come with a rally as it was Luke Prokop who scores his second at the 16-minute mark of the second period. So now we have a 4-3 game for Edmonton. And that's how things stood after the second period. Third period, both sides took a penalty for the most part, but the third period was played tightly as with this being a 1-goal game. Actually, there was no scoring to report in the third period, so Edmonton actually ultimately takes this first game of this weekend set with a 4-3 win. Edmonton also had a slight edge in shots by outshooting Calgary 31-29 overall. Edmonton was led by Jalen Lupin with 2 goals and assists, and Carson Latimer had a goal and assist, as well as Liam Keller chipped in with 2 assists. So I usually highlight who had multi-point games for both sides of the puck. Now when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, it was Jack McNaughton who made 27 saves for Calgary, while Sebastian Costa who made 26 saves for Edmonton. So that was game number 9. So game number 10, this happened the next night on Saturday, March the 27th, as the team shifts back to Calgary at the 7G Sportsplex 7 p.m. puck drop, or no, 2 p.m. puck drop as I meant to say. So an afternoon delay with a quick turnaround and the team shifting to Calgary for an afternoon game. Edmonton, once again, they were showing they were the better team and outplayed the Calgary Hitmen for most of the first period. That being said, there was actually only 1 goal to report in the first period. As was Dylan Gunther, who scores his 9th goal of the season for Edmonton. So just past the 16.5 minute mark, or past the 16 minute mark, Edmonton got their first goal, so Edmonton had a 1-0 lead, and that's how things stood. After the first period, second period, the Calgary Hitmen did put in a better effort. Both sides took 2 penalties each. Edmonton took their penalties early in the period, while Calgary took their couple penalties late in the period. Both sides also scored a goal each. First, it was Jake Neighbours for Edmonton who scores his third just past the 14-minute mark, so Edmonton took a 2-0 lead at that point in the second period. Calgary actually scored a shorthanded goal when they took their penalties late in the second period. It was Sean Tessier who scores his third just before the 17.5-minute mark to make it 2-1 the game, so Edmonton actually took a 2-1 lead after the second period. Third period, Edmonton pulls ahead with a couple goals early in the third period to blow this one wide open to pretty much seal the fate for the Calgary Hitmen in this game. First, Edmonton takes a 3-1 lead as Jake Neighbours scores his second of the game just before the 2-minute mark of the third period to make it 3-1 for Edmonton at that point. And then it was Scott Atkinson who scores his fifth of the season just before the 4.5-minute mark. So Edmonton took a 4-1 lead by scoring 2 goals in the 4.5 minutes of the third period. Calgary, however, did get one back as Riley Stotts scores his second just past the 11.5-minute mark to make it a 4-2 game for the Edmonton Oil Kings at that point. However, Edmonton did put this one away for sure, as it was Kate Oliver who scores his fifth of the season at 14:45 to make it a 5-2 game, and ultimately Edmonton wins this one 5-2. So Edmonton looking good by taking 2 out of 3 in this weekend set so far. Ultimately, Edmonton also outshot the Calgary Hitmen 45-31, overall outplaying Calgary for most of the game. The Edmonton Oil Kings, they were led by Jake Neighbours, who had 2 goals and assists. Dylan Gunther had a goal and 2 assists. Scott Atkinson had a goal and assist, and Connor Savage had 2 assists, so there was some offense to go around. Some multi-point games going around for the Edmonton Oil Kings. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, well, Braden Peters, he was a lot busier. Obviously, with Calgary a lot more shots, making 40 saves for Calgary, while Sebastian Cossa made 29 saves for the Edmonton Oil Kings. So that was Game 10. So Game 11, this happened on Sunday, March 28th, as the scene shifts back up to Edmonton at the downtown community arena for a 4 p.m. puck drop, which I know the Edmonton community arena is just outside of Rogers Place, the primary home of the Oilers. Back at Edmonton to wrap up this weekend, so just like the previous game, the Edmonton Oil Kings outplayed the Calgary Hitmen, but the Hitmen showing that they were the better team. Actually, there was no score in the report in the first period, so it was 0-0. However, Edmonton had an 18-8 edge in shots in the first period. Second period, the Calgary Hitmen did actually play better, cutting down the scoring chances and the shots against. And actually, the first goal of the game went to the Calgary Hitmen, as it was Sean Tessier who scores his fourth just past the 14-minute mark. So Calgary led 1-0 at that point, and that's actually how things stood after the second period, that the Calgary Hitmen took a 1-0 lead with over the Edmonton Oil Kings. Note that Calgary killed off a double minor after scoring the first goal of the game, so that was also another thing that helped, not to, change any momentum. Third period, the Edmonton Oil Kings did press back, outplaying and dominating the Calgary Hitmen in play. However, actually in the third period was Riley Stotts. He scores his third just past the 2.5-minute mark early in the third period to make it a 2-0 game for the Calgary Hitmen. Edmonton was able to get one back on the power play as Josh Williams scores his seventh just before the 8.5-minute mark. So now it's a 2-1 game for Calgary at that point in the third period, with Edmonton outplaying, looking for the tying goal, and outplaying the Calgary Hitmen. Braden Peters definitely was standing tall for the Calgary Hitmen in this one, keeping it a 2-1 game. Calgary also kept the play at points in the Edmonton zone, so Edmonton wasn't able to pull their goalie, because Edmonton didn't pull their goalie at all in this game looking for the tying goal. Actually, ultimately, what happened is the Calgary Hitmen actually ultimately hang on and win this one, and I would say they stole this one with a 2-1 victory, because the Edmonton Oil Kings actually outshot the Calgary Hitmen 42-22 overall, including 18-8 in the first period for Edmonton and 16-5 for Edmonton in the third period. So Braden Peters definitely was the story of this game, as if you look at the goaltending story of the game, he made 41 saves for Calgary, so Braden Peters definitely got the first star of the game. While it was Colby Knight who made 20 saves for the Edmonton Oil Kings, so Edmonton still took 2 out of 3 against the Calgary Hitmen in this weekend set, but we stole the last game and we were within 1 in the first game. That's some solace you can take out of that. So Game 12, this will be the last game in this episode to recap before going to other business. This wound up being on Friday, April the 2nd, as the Calgary Hitmen now have a weekend set with the Medicine Tigers. And for the Game 12 on Friday, this was on the road in Medicine at Co-op Place for a 7 p.m. puck drop. Now this is, say, a 3-game set with the Medicine Tigers. First period, both sides played well, and no one dominated in the play. However, the Medicine Tigers did strike when they had the chance. First goal came at the 9-minute mark for Medicine. It was Ryan Shadowski who scores his 6th to make it a 1-0 game. Then Medicine scores one in the final minute of the first period. I always say it's the dagger when you score in the final minute of the period. It was, of course, Horson Hope who scores his 8th of the season. Now Medicine takes a 2-0 lead, and that's how things stood after the first period with Medicine leading 2-0. Second period, I felt the Calgary Hitmen did have an edge in play and get within one. It was Josh Prokop who scores for Calgary at the 14.5-minute mark, so it was later in the second period that Calgary was able to get their first goal of the game to make it a 2-1 game for Medicine, and that's how things stood after the second period with Medicine leading 2-1. Third period, Medicine Tigers pulled away with a hedge in play, and ultimately did pull away with this one. It was Lucas Svechkowski, if I said it right, scores his 7th on the power play just past the 4-minute mark to make it a 3-1 game. And of course, then Lucas Svechkowski scores the 2nd of the game on the power play again just past the 14-minute mark. So now Medicine had a 4-1 lead. I keep saying the penalty kill for the Calgary Hitmen has been a weak point for the team so far this season. I think every game that in this recap there was at least a power play goal against, other than that Edmonton game when we stole that one. So once again, the power play proved to be the difference in this one as the Medicine Tigers. They won this one 4-1. Shots were even at 31 apiece for both sides. Medicine was led by Lucas Svechkowski, or Svechkowski, if I don't know how exactly how to say it, had 2 goals in this one. And then Ryan Shadowski had a goal and assist. And then you had Daniel Baker, who also chipped in with 2 assists for the Medicine Tigers. Braden Peters, who was in net for the Calgary Hitmen, made 27 saves. And then it was Garen Bjorklund who made 30 saves for the Medicine Tigers. So that's where the Calgary Hitmen stand. And where do we stand after 12 games? Well, we have 5 wins, 6 losses, and that 1 loss in overtime. For 11 points, put us 3rd in the Central Alberta group. So we are ahead of the Lethbridge Hurricanes at least. So let's just take a look at the standings, shall we? Quick look at the standings before we go on to other business and look ahead to the next 6 games of the schedule for the Calgary Hitmen. So if we look at the U.S. division, well, the top 3, well, the Everett Silvertips, they were 6-1 in 7 games, and they were definitely led by Dustin Wolf in net, who is the Calgary Flames prospect. Then you got the Portland Winterhawks after 7 games, they're 4-1-2 for 10 points. And then you got the Seattle Thunderbirds around at the top 3 of the U.S. division with 4-3 record after 7 games and 8 points. In the BC division, as the BC division just got started, well, the Canada's Blazer, who are led by Captain Connor Zari, another Calgary Flames prospect, they were 3-0 after their first 3 games for 6 points. Then the Vancouver Giants, after 3 games, they're 2-1 for 4 points. And then the Kelowna Rockets, after 2 games, they're 1-1 for 2 points. And then the wild card, you got Tri-City, who are the 4th place. You got Tri-City Americans, after 6 games, they're 2-4 for 4 points. Then you got the Prince George Cougars, who are behind after 3 games, they're 1-2 for 2 points. And then you got the Spokane Chiefs, after 5 games, they're 0-1 with overtime or shield loss for 1 point. Then the Victoria Royals, after 3 games, are 0-3. So that rounds up the BC/US division. So in the Central Division, I'll give you an idea how strong the Edmonton Oil Kings are. After 11 games, they're 10-1 for 20 points. And then the Medicine Tigers, they're also not too far behind. After 11 games, they're 8-3 for 16 points. So that's the top 2 teams in the division right now. And then you got the Calgary Hitmen, who are 3rd at 5-6-1 for 11 points. That's in the Central Division. The East Division, there's also some strength there as well, as the Saskatoon Blades are in 1st after 11 games. They're 9-1-1 for 19 points. Followed by the Brandon Wheat Kings after 11 games. They're 8-2-1 for 17 points. And then the Winnipeg Winnipeg Ice. The name slipped my mind for a sec. After 11 games, they're 7-4 for 14 points. So the East Division starting to look stronger. So when you look at the when it comes to the everyone else, well, the Moose Jaw Warriors after 12 games, they're also 5-6-1, just like the Calgary Hitmen for 11 points. Then you got the Regina Pats after 11 games, they're 4-5-2 for 10 points. Then you got the Lethbridge Hurricanes, who are last in Alberta. After 11 games, they're 3-6-2 for 8 points. And then you got everyone else in the East Saskatchewan division, as the Prince Albert Raiders are 3-6-1 after 11 games. They have overtime and shootout losses in separate columns, as they have 8 points. Then the Swift Current Broncos, who are 3-7-1 after 11 games for 7 points. Then you got the Red Deer. I'm going to say actually the Red Deer Rebels are last, actually, not Lethbridge, so sorry Lethbridge. The Red Deer Rebels are actually after 11 games, they're 2-7-2 for 6 points. So I'll give you an idea that it looks like when it comes to Alberta, Medicine Hat and Edmonton are the strong teams. Calgary's in the middle with Lethbridge and Red Deer. So that's the quick standings, and let's go to hitmenhockey.com. So now it comes to the leading scorer. Well, Josh Prokop is leading the team in scoring. After 12 games, he has 5 goals, 6 assists for 11 points. Followed by Tyson Galloway, he has 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points in 9 games. And then Tristan Zandy in 12 games, he has a goal, 6 assists for 7 points. Tom Tessier-Girl and Riley Fitter-Schultz are on the top 5 with 6 points. Sean Tessier-Girl has 4 goals, 2 assists for 6 points in 12 games. And Riley Fitter-Schultz has 3 goals, 3 assists for 6 points in 12 games. And then when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, I think right now you're going to say Braden Peters is the leading goalie right now. I'm going to bring up all the the stats when it comes to how they break it down on the WHL website. We're going to go to hitmenhockey.com. After Braden Peters, when it comes to the goaltending, is 4-4 right now, and then Jack Benotton is 1-2 at that point, and Braden Peters had that one shutout. So that's the quick stats and standing story for the Calgary Hitmen, as well as the rest of the Western Hockey League. There's no other stats I can find out for team stats, like where they rank on power play or penalty kill or shots against. So how has Calgary done against the other teams in Alberta? Well, we're 1-2 against the Edmonton Oil Kings, 1-2-0. And then with the Lethbridge Hurricanes, we are 2-1-0. And then the Medicine Hat Tigers, we are 1-3-0. And then the Red Deer Rebels, we are 1-0-1. So that's how the only teams are going to be playing in the WHL for this season. So the last part of the episode, we'll take a look ahead to the next 6 games now that the schedule has been released for the rest of the season. So game 13, this will be on Saturday, April the 3rd, as the Calgary Hitmen continues their weekend set with the Medicine Hat Tigers. That'll be a 7 p.m. puck drop at the 7G Sportsplex. Game 14, this will be on Monday, April 5th, as the Calgary Hitmen will go back to Medicine Hat at the Co-op Place for a 7 p.m. puck drop. And then the next weekend on game 15, this will be on Friday, April the 9th, as the Calgary Hitmen will take on the Red Deer Rebels. The Friday night game will be in Red Deer at the Western Park Centrium, 7 p.m. puck drop. And that'll be game 15. Game 16, the Calgary Hitmen will be at home with the Red Deer Rebels at the 7G Sportsplex. That'll be a 7 p.m. puck drop then. And then game 17 will actually be on Monday, April the 12th, as the Calgary Hitmen will go back up to Red Deer at the Western Park Centrium for a 7 p.m. puck drop. And then the last game, that will be the next episode for game 18, before I recap. This will be on Friday, April 16th, as the Edmonton Oil Kings will be taking on the Calgary Hitmen at home at the 7G Sportsplex for a 7 p.m. puck drop. So that's all I have for when it comes to my Calgary Hitmen in 6, as I'm going to say this season we're just getting games in just for the prospects and that can develop and play. And all I have, just for follow that, I mean just different expectations when you have junior hockey. That I'm going to say the Calgary Hitmen are kind of in the middle of the road team right now when you look at how they stack up with the other Alberta teams. Definitely going to say the sore spot right now has been the penalty kill when I'm looking at the game summaries. So anyways, like I say, if you want to follow along this Calgary sports fans journey, home of the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders. I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, where I talk stories, recap games, like this for example. But I also do a variety of non-sports content as well. Let's say in-person vlogs, attempt comedy, and I also do share my experiences. Let's say I'm on the road or at a sporting event. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along this Calgary sports fan's journey, you know what you need to do. Just make sure you like, subscribe. I also have my other social links down in the description below. I guess I'll close out and say let's go Hitmen, and I'll see you in the next video.